Hey Trinity family, welcome back to some more digital content. I'm joined here with Pastor John as we continue looking at the question of what is the Sabbath, why did God give us the Sabbath, and how do we appropriately view it? So John, you kind of brought this idea to light to me back when you were the primary teaching pastor in a series. But what got you interested in looking into the Sabbath, God's view of the Sabbath, and just helping the rest of our church understand that?
Yeah, I think it actually came out of another study for me. It was probably 25 years ago or so when I got interested in what is God's view of work. And I don't mean vocational ministry, I mean just of what we would call secular work. And I started doing some study on work. And of course, that led to this, what I call the divine cadence between work and rest, because rest becomes a factor then when you start studying God's view of work. He wants us to work 6 days a week and then rest, rest being a key aspect of what we call the Sabbath. And so I began recognizing that a little bit more and ultimately began studying this idea of rest or Sabbath. And then in particular, I think it was about 5 years ago, I went to a conference. It was a number of pastors who work to help other pastors stay spiritually healthy is what the conference was. And the speaker was Matthew Sleet. He is a doctor, a medical doctor. Actually came to Christ, I think, as an adult, began discovering the life that Jesus had for him, and he discovered this aspect of rest or Sabbath, and he began studying it intently. Became so fascinated with it, his own practice of it, and encouraging other people, that he quit his medical practice and went into full-time ministry teaching people about Sabbath and rest and all the aspects that come out of that, the good things that come out of that. Wrote a book called 24/6, which is kind of an introduction to Sabbath, not a real technical, not a heavily theological book, but just a good introduction. And that, again, kind of fired 5-6 years ago, fired my interest in studying it even more. So it started with the study of work, led to rest out of that.
So in the Old Testament, there were clear laws that the Jewish nation had to follow, and the Israelites were kind of tasked with, you work this long, you take this break, there were certain things you do and don't do on the Sabbath. In a post-resurrection world, how should we as modern Christians relate with the Sabbath? Do those rules still apply? Do we have different rules? What does that kind of look like for a modern Christian?
Yeah. Well, you can get a lot of debate on that question in terms of are we supposed to be following the law today, or does Jesus fulfill the law? What does that mean that Jesus fulfilled the law? Does that mean that it has nothing to do with me anymore? All of those questions, I am certain that we'll find people on different sides than what I take on that. But yes, in the Old Testament, this was a law that you were commanded to follow. It's one of the 10 commandments. It's that commandment right in between the commandments that focus on how we're to relate to God and the commandments that talk about how we're to relate to people. Right in the middle of those is this commandment about the Sabbath, of stopping our work and focusing on Jesus. So is that still a command for us? Are we obligated to have a Sabbath? I think is kind of the question we're looking at. Jesus practiced the Sabbath, but he also made people mad in how he practiced the Sabbath. So there's a lot to be said in there. He did indicate at one point that the Sabbath was made for us, not us for the Sabbath. So there's something in there that apparently is for our good. And I think this might even take us all the way back to Genesis 2. When Genesis 2:2, it tells us that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. So we even see God resting on the seventh day. Why did God rest? I mean, he wasn't tired. He wasn't worn out. He wasn't out of ideas. And yet he established this pattern. And then we see later in Exodus 31, I think it is, and many other places, where he then commanded us to follow this pattern that he set. So that tells me that there's something in there that's not just a matter of us following a law. Do I have to follow a law? Technically, no, I follow Jesus who fulfills the law. And that's a little bit different. That's a whole different discussion too. But I follow Jesus, but he took the Sabbath seriously. So in following him, I want to do that. And there's something in that that is a part of our design. So it's not just a law that we follow. God designed us to work 6 days and rest one. And so I want to take that design seriously. He did what is good for us. So it's not even for me a law that I'm following. It's how do I get in step with Jesus? How do I get in step with how God designed me? It looks like it's to work 6 days and rest one. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So I guess that brings me to the question, what does Sabbath look like for us? How do we practice Sabbath? Do I just quit going to my job for the day? Do I sit on the couch and think all day? Like, what does a Sabbath look like biblically? And then also just kind of like, from your experience, how should we practice that?
Yeah. But I think the basic essentials of Sabbath are to rest, which is the word that is often used in the New Testament in referring to the Sabbath is rest. Hebrews 4 talks about the rest that is being offered us in Jesus. In fact, he is our rest if we ultimately, when we look at the big picture. But this idea of rest, but also the idea of refreshment comes in. God rested on the seventh day and was refreshed. That's fascinating to me. What I understand that I need to be refreshed.
Yeah.
But here it tells us that God was refreshed. There's something powerful in this idea of this rest that we take. So what does that mean for us? What do we actually do? So I have kind of boiled it down to a short list of broad things that I try to focus on. Number one, whatever it is that I do those other 6 days, whatever that is, I don't do that. That's clearly my work. I stop. Stop is a really key word. Matthew Sleeth likes that word stop. It's his stop day. That's what he calls. He stops doing what he does those other days. So that's the first thing, is to identify what your typical day looks like and make this one different. A word that is key for me on a Sabbath day is whatever I do on my stop day, I want it to be kind of slow-paced. No rush to it, no real time frame. The clock doesn't matter. That's a huge thing in America.
Yeah.
We are dominated by the clock. And to set the clock aside for one day, that's going to be a different day. You might have to set your phone these days aside.
Yeah.
But stop and slow down. I think my favorite picture of slowing down, I mentioned this to someone just recently. I went for a walk one day on my Sabbath day, and it was a long walk, so I was going quite a ways. And so I walked down to University Avenue. This was before the roundabouts were in and everything. Traffic was pretty heavy. And I got to University, and I was going to cross University, and there was a lot of traffic. And so my thought was, I'm going to have to, hurry across before the next car gets here. And I thought, but this is my Sabbath day. I don't hurry on my Sabbath day. I go slow. So I stood there on University, not on the street, but on the side, on the side of the street, until there was a big gap in traffic, and I walked slowly across University. But it's just, we have so many things like that we are hurrying to get done. On my Sabbath day, I don't want to hurry to do anything. So I stop working, I slow down. But in the process of whatever I'm doing then, and we'll probably have to talk about what do you do and don't do. Whatever I do, I want to be remembering God. He's the one that gives me the privilege of doing whatever it is I've chosen to do. He's the one that's given me the ability to do it. If in fact I can, if I'm physically healthy and those kinds of things, I want to remember who gives that to me. He's the one that created me and ultimately will take me home. I mean, my life is in his hands. So throughout that day of stopping my normal work, slowing down, I want to be remembering God and thinking about him and being very intentional about that. And then I want to rejoice in what he's offering me, what he's allowing me to do, what he's promised. My best days are yet to come, I believe, as a follower of Jesus. For all of us, our best days are yet to come. We can rejoice in that. So Sabbath should be a day when I'm focused on God and rejoicing and doing something that maybe reflects that in my physical experiences or whatever I'm doing.
And I feel like slowness takes intentionality. Like I'm thinking, like even just like normal chores, housework, regular work. How often do we just work slowly? We're often in a rush. We have a list of things to do, and if I don't hurry, I won't get through everything.
We value productivity here. Let me put it this way. We worship productivity here. We idolize productivity. So if you are not producing something, you're wasting your time. That's the way we think. That's wrong in God's eyes. He wants us to remember, and I think this is a key aspect of the Sabbath. He wants us to remember that he is the one that produces the things that last. He is the one that is ultimately going to make our life fruitful and those kinds of things. Don't forget that. And that one day of rest is designed to help us remember that productivity is not our God. We can set it aside. I don't have to obey that urge to produce something this hour. I can set it aside and say, thank you, God, that you're the one that produces the things that really last and the things that really matter. And I'm just going to honor you in whatever I choose to do right now.
So you mentioned earlier that we probably have to discuss like what do and don't you do on the Sabbath. So I mean, we can't create a whole list. I mean, even if we did, that would be debated by everyone.
Absolutely.
So maybe what's a partial short list of this place and time? What are some of your thoughts? Let's start just with like what should you do on the Sabbath?
Don't do what you do the other 6 days, whatever that is. I mean, even whatever pattern. For instance, I'm mostly retired now, so I've spent a lot of time this summer working on remodeling our patio. So when I get to a Sabbath day, I'm thinking, should I work on that patio today? Because I really enjoy it. But that's what I've been doing the other days. Should I have a day where I step back and I remember it's God who... So I had to wrestle with that. I've kind of decided that I should set that aside one day. Not because I have to, but because I think it would help me remember God. So everybody has to wrestle with that question. If you've got a job, that's simple. Work, you definitely set aside. Your vocational work, if at all possible. But what do you do then? Let's say you're a mother at home, and part of your job is to feed the kids. What you cannot do is say, sorry kids, it's the Sabbath. You don't get fed today. You can't do that. So you have to think through, all right, how can I do this in a way that would allow me to have a little bit of break, but would still take care of these important needs of feeding the kids. So maybe you plan some prepared meals ahead of time, or you plan to have pizza or something really simple that day that is not going to require you to do a lot of work and allows you a little more time to rest. You plan ahead and think through how you can not do the things that you don't want to do or minimize them as much as possible. Then in terms of what you do, if it's not work and if you've minimized the things that have to be done, I just don't know that God has rules as to what we can or cannot do. In the old days, before I became a Christian, I've heard stories about this, that on Sundays you weren't allowed, and some people were told they weren't allowed to play games, and they weren't allowed to be with friends, and just this long list of rules. I am not in favor of trying to list out a long list of things that we can and can't do. I think we end up in absurdity when we do that. The Pharisees had a long list of rules that you could not do on the Sabbath day, and some of them were absurd. You could not, for instance, move a chair on the Sabbath in your home, because the floors were often dirt in those early days, and the chairs were heavy, and so if you moved it, you tended to drag it. And when you drag a heavy chair through dirt, it produces two little furrows. And a furrow is what you make when you're getting ready to plant something. That's part of work. So you can't move that chair because you're working when you do that. I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah.
It's just absurdity. And I think we have some of those same kinds of absurdities when we try to make laws as to what you can and cannot do. I would say this, that does it help you remember God? And does it help you rejoice in who He is? If it does those two things and it's not part of your normal work, then I say it's certainly worth considering doing. So take something like mowing the lawn. Some people hate mowing the lawn. That will not be a Sabbath activity for you. If you're mowing and you're grumbling and complaining about mowing the lawn again, don't do that on your Sabbath. I mean, you're not thinking about God.
Yep.
But if you find, and I'm a little bit in this category, not always, but if you find that mowing gives you a little solitude, a little time, it's just you because you're not in a conversation with someone while you're mowing. If it gives you freedom to think and to dream a little bit, and you can contemplate God and kind of go through your life with Him as you're mowing, that monotonous back and forth kind of thing, I don't have any trouble with doing that on a Sabbath day. It has to do with where my heart and mind are fixed, more so than on the activity itself. Is it a refreshing thing for you? Do you rejoice in God while you're doing this? If so, do that.
Yeah.
At least on an individual basis. Now, the other aspect of this is, what about the communal aspect of Sabbath? Because I do not think, and this again is an American thing, I do not think that we're designed just to figure out how to live life for myself.
Yep.
We live in community. We live in relationships. So I do think there's a relational aspect to Sabbath, and this is my most recent part of studying this. So I'm less probably, particularly as a strong introvert as I am, I've probably thought more about the individual aspect of it. But there is a communal aspect that we are designed to Sabbath together as well. So this is where that Sunday gathering can be so key as a part of our Sabbath. Where is my mind fixed when I come to that gathering? Do I want this to be a genuine worship of God where I'm also inviting other people into His presence? And have I thought about that before I get to that service? How am I going to actually do that? Will this change the way I relate to people? Will this change what I say to them when I'm talking to them? I have to think through that much more, but I think it's an important part of Sabbath. I think it's meant to be shared. So it matters to me how my wife interacts with Sabbath. That ought to be a part of what I think about. And it matters to me what my brothers and sisters in Christ. So I'm still kind of exploring that aspect, but I'm sure it's a piece of Sabbath that we live in community.
Yeah. And that's a good thought. I recently had a discussion with a guy. We were talking about the two greatest commandments. So love the Lord your God, love other people, and how a lot of us, self included, like we tend to fall on one side or the other. It's Do I focus on me and God, or do I focus on me and other people?
Yeah.
But it's not an either or. What is the greatest commandment? And Jesus is like, these two.
Yeah.
He's like, there's this one, and then the second one is just like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great thought. It's one I hadn't thought of. Like, how do you do Sabbath with a community?
Yeah.
So how would you handle that then? Like, let's say you have different people on different schedules. So say you're a pastor, so Sunday is not your Sabbath. And let's say your wife is working full time. So how do you think households could maybe handle some of those issues with a divergent Sabbath, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I wish I could just give you great success stories on that. It's a challenge. It's a hard thing to work out. I do think it takes more planning than probably most of us want to put into it, which might be a statement in itself. It could be that we talk about shorter periods of time, that maybe it's not going to be a whole day.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have if you have young children, it might be a partnership. I'll take my Sabbath right now, and I'll help you take your Sabbath later. Kind of thing. In the meantime, somebody watches the kids.
Yep.
Some planning and working out details. I think we tend to. I tend to want to be spontaneous. I mean, by nature, I'm a spontaneous person. But life doesn't always work out for the spontaneous guy. We have to do some planning ahead, and particularly when we think about the communal aspects and working with other people. Yeah. It might just be that I need to sacrifice a bit to help this person.
Yeah. I think what you said was really interesting. At the start, you mentioned, we have to plan potentially. And there's this, you have to be intentional about rest. Because if we're not intentional about rest, we're not going to rest. We're going to find something to fill that time.
Yeah, we do have to be intentional. And I think we could even put that in different language. We have to decide which God we're going to follow. Are we going to follow the God who calls us to rest, or are we going to follow the God who calls us to be productive? And one of those is a false God. Yeah. Productive all the time, I mean. One of those is a false God, and who are we going to follow? And I think we have to make that decision over and over and over again, because our culture is pushing us to be productive. Nobody ever gets applauded for resting. When was the last time you saw someone get an award for resting well, even though we're called to do it?
Yeah.
We don't do that in our culture, and so we will tend to do what is applauded.
Yeah. And
we have to make decisions over and over. Which God are we going to follow?
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to a final question here of, so where do we start? I mean, I know quite a few people in our church. Some are amazing at Sabbath. Some of us not so much. So, I mean, if I'm like, you know what? I just watched this amazing video where Brian and John told me I need to Sabbath. What do I do now? Like, what might be a first step? Where can we start on Sabbathing the way God designed for us to Sabbath?
Yeah. And I'd go back, make a plan. Pick a day. Don't say, sometime this week I'm going to do this. No. Pick a day. Pick a time if it can't be a whole day. Pick a time. And put it on your calendar or however people do that today. So it's on there. And when you look at it, you see it coming.
Yeah.
Then start thinking through what you want it to look, what that time will look like for you. So I think it's as simple as starting to make a plan like that and starting to develop. And then you'll practice that, and you'll find out, well, that didn't work that well. My mind was racing with work-related stuff. So what can I do to get control? You'll start noticing as you practice other things that you have to make plans for. So for me, when I started, I mentioned going on that walk that one time. I started walking because I had to walk. As I was walking, I would be more likely to be thinking about God than if I was not walking or doing something around home. I'd fall into the productivity. Walking, I can't do much else, so I would tend to, loving nature as well, I'd try to get out in the woods or something, I'd think more about God. So I was making a plan to do what would help me Sabbath. And I don't think God's against making plans. Particularly when the plan includes obeying Him and resting and getting away from this slavery to productivity and to work that we live under here in the States. So make a plan, start living it out, make adjustments to it as it works or doesn't work, and expect it to continually change. We're going to grow, and I mean, I can't say that I have a practice that I do continually. It changes. But I know that there have been days, Sabbath days, that I will never forget. I mean, they were just that amazing to me. I can't say that that's the norm, but it's always possible today. And those days are really something. When just that awareness of God, that sense of closeness to God, that's worth pursuing.
So I mean, I think coming up with a plan and maybe looking at your week and saying, well, I can't not work these days, so clearly that's not a Sabbath. Like, find what day can you fully unplug from work, and maybe just start a list of what can I enjoy, what can I not enjoy, realizing that we can't just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to take care of my kids for a day. But maybe what can I enjoy with my kids?
And that kind of planning is good. And if you have it on the calendar, then if someone calls you and says, hey, can we get together such and such a day at 2 o'clock, you can look at your calendar and say, I'm sorry, I'm already booked. Because it's there. And it is. You have an appointment with God.
I think, too, like, helping other people that you know protect that, too.
Sure.
So, like, if I know your Sabbath is a day and something comes up, I know I can wait till the day after. So that we can help. That might be part of that communal aspect as well.
I was thinking that very same thing. To be aware of what other people are doing or wanting to do, and to protect that time for them.
And maybe even celebrating that to get some applause in that direction of, hey, how's your Sabbath been? What did you get out of your Sabbath this week? How did you reflect on God? So it's kind of a rewiring our mindset to that 24/6 idea of this one day is really important. So it shouldn't be just sidetracked. It should be spotlighted from time to time.
And Sabbath is something that can be taken with us into our work days then. We could spend, there's 6 days in between those Sabbaths, we could spend the first 3 days reminiscing about having met God in a unique way, or understood something about God, or having just thought about God uniquely that day. We can reminisce about that for 3 days, and then the next 3 days we can anticipate the one that's coming. I mean, we can kind of make that a center of our lives. This day when we remember who really does the work.
Yeah.
And it's God.
Yeah.
Thank you, God. Yeah.